It was a strange thing, the feeling that she got when she told people about Virgil. Time had made it less upsetting, less immediately painful, but she still preferred to keep quiet about losing her husband. Having to talk about it filled her with shame and embarrassment, as if it were her fault, as if she had chosen to become a widow at 22. "I'm sorry. I thought you knew about that already," she said. The wide-eyed surprise on the doctor's face made it clear that he hadn't. "I'm so sorry," he mumbled, averting his gaze. "I've only been in town a few months. I still have a lot to learn, I guess." "Well, anyway, that's the reason I'm not decorating," she said. "It seems frivolous to spend time worrying about the holiday when there's so little to celebrate." His brow furrowed as he considered what she had said. "I understand. After a loss like that, it must be difficult to appreciate what you have left. Still, you have a beautiful home to keep you cozy this winter. You have your health, and my son's sick. God willing, Frankie will be back to normal soon. That's worth celebrating, don't you think?" She shrugged. "I really don't want to ruin your Christmas by talking about all this. It's just, well, what's that phrase? Goodwill towards men? Peace on earth, goodwill towards men," he said. "That's right." "Well, Virgil could have used some goodwill, and he sure didn't get any," she said. "What do you mean? What happened to him? I mean, if you don't mind my asking." "He was robbed," she said. "He was taking some beaver pelts over to Prairie du Chien, but somebody wanted them more, I guess. They stabbed him and stole everything he had." "Good Lord, that's terrible." "They even stole his boots from his body," she said, her voice dropping down to a mere whisper now. "Can you imagine what people are like when they'll do that to another person?" Alex let out a long sigh. "Honestly, no. I can't imagine how somebody could do that. I'm sorry. That was over a year ago now. He's been gone for longer than I even knew him. In a way, I sometimes think that was for the best, though. If I had known him better, I surely would feel the loss even more." Alex frowned. "Do you think that he would have wanted you to forget about Christmas?" "Maybe not, but getting widowed sure didn't put me in a holiday mood, especially last year. I was all alone then. At least now I have Frankie to keep me company." "I understand how you didn't want to celebrate the holiday last year," he said, trying to put things as gently as he could. "That must have been very, very hard. Certainly harder than anything I've ever been through." "It was a real rough patch," she said quietly, nodding. "But that was a long time ago. It seems almost like yesterday sometimes." "I'm sure it does," he said, pressing on. "But when I look at this house Virgil built you, or when I see the toy horse that he carved, all I see is the care that he poured into his family. He's no longer here, but his love remains all around you. Surely you don't think that he'd want the two of you to spend Christmas like this? He would have wanted you to have some joy for the season, don't you think?" "Perhaps. But right now I'm not feeling very joyous." "You're at least going to church in the morning, though, aren't you?" "No, we're not." Alex had been about to take another sip of tea, but he stopped the cup halfway, unable to conceal his surprise. "Really? But everyone's going to be there. The whole town, practically." She shrugged again. "The whole town except us. I only know a few people around here anyway," she said. "I'm originally from up north." "Well, this would be the perfect chance to meet more people then, don't you think? There'll be songs and food and decorations and food." "No, I think we'll just stay home," she said. "Frankie's still not feeling well." "You know, I could prescribe some fresh air and Christmas carols. Then you'd have to go. Doctor's orders." She gave him a small smile. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but even if I wanted to go, we don't have anybody to take us anyway." "You don't have a horse and carriage?" "Of course we do," she said. "But somebody's got to hold the baby. I can't just put him in my pocket." She nodded toward the window. The snow was coming down even harder than before. "And with this weather, I doubt a carriage would get through in the morning anyway." "I guess that's true," he finally conceded. They fell quiet for a while, simply watching the snow fly outside and drinking their tea, with the smell of the wood smoke and the crackle of the fire in the air. Emily, at least, was enjoying his company. In spite of all of the unpleasant memories that had resurfaced, She was also remembering the simple pleasure of sitting and talking with another adult. It was a real change to be spending time with somebody who could enjoy a drink without needing a burp cloth. Not to mention that he's such an attractive man, she thought. There was no use denying it. Sitting with him here and taking a longer time to consider him, her first impression had only been confirmed. He was very good looking. Handsome and a doctor. Quite a combination. His wife probably can't wait for him to get home. Still, in spite of the snow, Emily was in no rush to send him on his way. It wasn't often that she had company like this. But then she had accepted that in this life there was sometimes a great difference between the way things were and the way they were supposed to be. The whole house creaked as a gust threw itself against the siding. "Listen to that," he murmured. "I guess I should be going before the storm gets too bad." "How much do I owe you for the visit, Doctor?" Alex waved his hand as if to dispel the thought. "Not a thing," he said. "You need compensation for your time at least, especially in this weather." "Really, don't worry about it." "Well, here, at least let me get you something to take with you." She went to the pantry and opened the door only slightly. It wouldn't have been wide enough for many others, but Emily slipped inside and half closed the door behind her, as if she didn't want him to see what was in there. What's she hiding? His curiosity was piqued. Alex's family had teased him about taking a job in the territories, claiming that he'd be eating nothing but roots and whatever he could hunt down himself. In his experience, however, some of these country wives had pantries that rivaled the finest kitchens back east, both in variety and quality. Since arriving, he'd been treated to some of the finest meats and game he'd ever had, and scarcely a day went by without somebody stopping by with a pie or pastry. He was going to need new pants fairly soon, but for now he was enjoying the benefits of being the first doctor in the county. Alex stepped to the side as quietly as he could and leaned over to see into the pantry. Emily was holding 2 jars in her hands, as if comparing them to see which one to offer. He recognized the dark red tint of strawberry preserves, and he smiled. The visit to Harper Farm had been fairly disheartening so far, but it looked like it was about to have a happy ending. He could almost taste it already. Piled high atop a slice of freshly toasted bread, it would make for a delicious Christmas breakfast. Or perhaps even better, on some fresh biscuits. He certainly wouldn't complain if she had some of those to throw in, too. Then his gaze passed to the shelves, and the pleasant rumbling of anticipation that he'd felt in his stomach immediately quieted. His cheeks began to burn. When Emily pulled the door closed after stepping into the pantry, she wasn't hiding any secret trove of delights. She simply wanted to hide the bare shelves. The pantry was empty. He stepped back to where he'd been and stared at the floorboards. They've got hardly any food at all, and here I am waiting for my portion, he thought. I'm literally taking sweets from a baby. Here you go, she said, emerging from the pantry and quickly closing it up behind her. I hope you like strawberries. He forced a smile, though he was sure that his eyes betrayed him. I love them, he said, taking the jar and studying it. This looks wonderful, it really does. But I don't think I actually have room for this, what with all of my other things. He held the jar out for her to take back. I'll have to pass. Thank you, though. Nonsense, she said. Surely you have room for a little jam jar. I really don't. The saddlebags are stuffed to bursting. I'll barely have room for this as it is, he said, lifting his bag from the floor. Give me that. She stuck out her hand, reaching toward his valise. Before he could protest further, she had taken it from him and opened it wide, revealing his few supplies at the bottom. There was room for a dozen jars inside. She gently placed the preserves within, closed it up, and handed it back. Problem solved, Doctor. Well, Thank you, he mumbled, putting on his coat and taking his hat and gloves in hand. I should be on my way. It's going to be a long ride back into town. She gave him a smile then, the first smile that he'd seen on her all night, and for a moment it seemed to relieve the exhaustion that she so clearly felt. Good night, Doctor, she said. I appreciate you coming out. Thank you. You're welcome, he said, going to the door, where he paused and turned back to her. And Merry Christmas. As soon as he'd said it, he felt his cheeks grow warm again. Good night. She only nodded. Her smile had become forced, as if hearing the words made her melancholy. Alex stepped outside, closing the door tight behind him, and jammed his hat in place, tilting the brim against the wind. The snowflakes looked soft and fluffy, but against his skin they revealed hard, cold edges. It didn't matter. He would have put up with much worse just to get out of that house. Such a depressing visit, he thought as he pulled his gloves tighter. She has no Christmas spirit whatsoever. Charlie snorted, stamping a hoof on the ground, and Alex sucked in his breath as he turned to look at his horse. Darn this snow. I should have known better. He had left Charlie tied at the post near the door, and thus exposed to the weather, when they were only steps from the barn where Emily's horse was presumably warm and dry. Although the snow had barely begun when they had arrived, the storm had now coated Charlie entirely in white. Alex brushed off what snow he could, then climbed into the saddle. The leather creaked as if it were about to split apart in the frigid air, and Alex patted Charlie's neck as he wheeled him toward town. Come on, old boy, he murmured. Time to go home. They left the farmhouse behind and started back towards Mineral Point. Almost as soon as they got going, Alex realized that there was more than one reason he was in for a difficult ride. The wind and cold caused their own problems, but on top of that, the clouds had choked out the moonlight, which made it difficult to see the trail. It wasn't so much of a concern just yet, when they were among cultivated fields and he could see where the corn had been growing only a couple of months earlier. Shortly, however, they'd pass into the unclaimed land that still surrounded much of Mineral Point. The trails there consisted of prairie grass bent one way or another, but with the snow and wind tonight, it might be difficult to find the right path once they got there. Also, it didn't help matters that he couldn't get Emily out of his mind. It wasn't simply because he had found her so attractive, although he had. It wasn't because he'd briefly imagined how much better Mrs. Sullivan would sound instead of Widow Harper, although he had thought about that too. It was because of how he had tried to convince her that she was wrong about the holiday, and she had refused to even listen. I'm a doctor, he thought. Perhaps the most highly educated man in the county, and she wouldn't even pay attention to me. She acted the same way his patients sometimes did. He explained what they needed to do to get better, and they did something else entirely. Oh well, not much I can do about that. If she wants to miss out on Christmas, that's up to her. I tried to help. In the back of his mind, a little voice piped up to mock him. Oh, you helped a lot, it said. Gave the boy a spoonful of water and took half their jam. Alex pulled his hat down lower and spurred Charlie ahead. It was slow going now, as they made their way up the hill that overlooked Emily's property. The snow was already drifting high in spots, but Charlie pushed through, no doubt anxious to get back to town and his own stall. It seemed like the wind had picked up as well, as if trying to sweep them back down the hill to the farmhouse. Alex's coat flapped around like he had a goose inside it, and the only reason that he retained his hat was because he kept hold of the brim. The noise of the wind racing through the bare trees atop the hill was enough to chill him thoroughly, even if the air hadn't done so already. All in all, he couldn't remember when he'd been out in worse weather, and the snow only spilled down more heavily the longer he was out. When they finally got to the top of the hill, Alex pulled back on the reins and turned Charlie so that he could look back down towards Harper Farm. The location of the house was barely visible, though he could make out a patch of light which he guessed was from the lamp in the kitchen window. He turned his head and looked toward the way ahead. No problem, he thought. I just have to follow the trail until I get to the road to Lancaster, then left until I pass Joe Tregaski's house, then north into town. Easy. Once I find the trail, that is. He narrowed his eyes as he stared ahead, though it did nothing to improve his sight. He couldn't tell where the trail was, he couldn't see the horizon, and if he'd had to guess which way was north, it would have been just that, a guess. There was nothing ahead but darkness and the unrelenting wind, hurling the snow at him with a fury he'd never seen before. If we make a wrong turn, we could be out here for hours at least. If there's nobody waiting for me to notice I'm missing, and even if there were, who would go out and search for me in weather like this? If I keep going, Charlie's probably the only one who will survive the night. The horse snorted at him, anxious to get going again. Alex looked back to Emily's house, then let his chin fall to his chest as he let out a sigh of surrender and turned Charlie around, back towards the farm. He certainly hadn't planned to spend Christmas Eve with a joyless widow and her sick child, but he had to admit that it sounded a mite better than freezing to death out here alone.